might seem impossible. Today, we are going to learn how to find and take a picture of a real fairy. So to get started, we're going to take a look at this amazing book titled A Natural History of Fairies by Emily Hawkins. A Natural History of Fairies is from the notebook of Professor Elsie Arbor. Here's her first entry. My dear Annabelle, as you know, during my career, I've made a name for myself studying plants, traveling the globe to learn everything I could about flowers and trees. However, what you do not know is that in the course of my work, I stumbled upon a new area of study that in recent years has become my true passion. I have gone to great lengths to keep this work a secret. I fear that if its real nature were known, I would be mocked by my colleagues and labeled a fool. This secret work, my dear one, is the study of fairies. Fairies are all around us, but they are shy creatures that can be very hard to find. You may have been lucky enough to see one already at the bottom of your garden, perhaps, or even in the attic. I have compiled this book as a guide to different species of fairy around the world. Within these pages, you will discover where and how fairies live, their role in the natural world, and how to find them. I'm about to embark on a voyage to South America, where I will journey into the depths of the Amazon rainforest in search for the little-known hummingbird fairy. This expedition will be fraught with danger, so before I depart, I'm sending you my book for safekeeping. Perhaps it will inspire some fairy finding adventures of your own. With all my love, Aunt Elsie. Friday, June 28th, 1895. What a peculiar day. As I was pottering in the garden after lunch, I heard snatches of twinkling laughter. They were coming from the greenhouse. Slowly and quietly, I tiptoed to the doorway and stopped on the threshold. The laughter came again, very clearly this time. And then, to my amazement, a tiny winged creature, human-like in form, fluttered out from among my tomato plants and looked at me square in the eye. I can't describe it as anything else but a fairy. Throughout history, many have dismissed fairies as the stuff of folklore or have classed them as magical beings. A great deal of nonsense has been written about fairies as mystical spirits, ghosts, angels, or even aliens from outer space. This book is my attempt to debunk these silly myths. Fairies are as real as you and me. It just takes a bit of patience to find them. So if you want to learn more about different types of fairies, definitely check this book out. And that brings us to step number 1 of finding a fairy. You can't find something that you don't believe in, and fairies will only manifest themselves to people who are pure of heart and who believe in their existence. The Fae, or fairies, are a supernatural race of beings that precede humanity. They have been seen as beings of light and goodness, but sometimes they also can be tricksters. They are immortal spirits of nature that exist in a realm separate from humanity. But there are some different ways that you can invite them into your world. That brings us to step number 2, and that is to prepare an inviting space for fairies to feel welcome. So think fairy garden. Fairies are attracted to places filled with life, so outdoors would be an ideal place. Your fairy garden could be as elaborate or as simple as you need it to be. I made this super cool fairy house using recycled materials, even concrete so that it could stay and go outside, and resin so it would be waterproof. This I made for my fairies so that they could come into the garden and feel welcome and stay. If you are short on time and art skills, the dollar store has a ton of amazing things that you could buy to put in your fairy garden. And you could use a flower pot or pretty much anything to make your fairy space. Fairies love plants and flowers that attract butterflies and bees. So any types of flowers that you could put around your fairy garden that are like that would be ideal to put and attract your fairies in your garden. They also like any types of herbs or flowers that produce fruit. Those would also be great things to add if you can. If you can't, that's okay. Fairies, like all living creatures, need water to survive. So if you could put a dish of water, or I found this cute little bird bath that I can add water to also place near my fairy garden. And of course, mushrooms. This is Gus, my little mushroom sculpture that I added. I love him, he's so cute. Trees also make a nice shelter for your fairy garden, so if you could build it around a tree, if you have that space, that's a great idea as well. After you have prepared your fairy garden or your outdoor space, the next step that you want to think about is how to prepare an offering for them. Fairies love receiving offerings, and that's the best way to build a relationship with a fairy. An offering can be as simple as milk or honey, if you have those on hand. Most people do have honey or milk. Those would be great to set out as an offering. They also love things made by hand. So we found this amazing recipe for Magic Moon cookies, and they're also delicious. And we're going to be setting these out as an offering for our fairy garden space. Some fairies even love things like rum and whiskey and even spirits, as they call them. So those would also make a really fun offering. Another offering besides food that you could set out or put out for them is music and sound. So if you play an instrument, that would be amazing to sit outside next to your fairy garden and play for them. If you sing, which I don't, singing a beautiful song for the fairies as an offering would be incredible. And then if you're not musically inclined like me, wind chimes are great to place out in your garden. And then also a bell or ringing bells, those would be great to add as an offering. So that brings us to step number 4, which is kind of the hardest step. Once you have your fairy garden, your offering, the next step is to patiently wait and watch. And this, like I said, can be super hard, especially if you're so excited to spot a fairy. Fairies exist all year round, but there are some times in particular where fairies are more active. One type of fairy activity is called a fairy revel, and that occurs actually at midnight. So if you're a night owl and you can stay up till midnight, then try to keep an eye out at that time for fairies. They also like the tween times or in between times. So think of dawn when the sun is rising or dusk when the sun is setting. They love those times. So those might be particularly active times where you could spot a fairy. There's also certain holidays and times of the year where fairies really enjoy presenting themselves. So Beltane, or May 1st, is a very fairy-oriented holiday, and Halloween is another time where fairies are active, and Midsummer's Eve, or the night before the first day of summer. Those are all times where you are more likely to spot a fairy in your garden. Something to keep in mind while you're waiting patiently and watching is that while fairies are real, they are not part of the physical plane. So some fairies won't even choose to manifest themselves in a human or animal form. They might just manifest in other ways that aren't so visible to the eye. So some different ways that you can tell if a fairy is near is if you get goosebumps on your arm, or there's a sudden rush of wind that's unexplained, or you hear the rustling of leaves or grass. Those are all signs that a fairy might be near and watching you. Also, think about different places that you might actually spot a fairy. They're not going to just come right out in front of you. They might be hiding in a tree, or dancing underneath of a mushroom, or drinking the nectar of their favorite flower. So those are some places that you might want to pay particular attention to when you're waiting and watching. And then finally, what do you do if you see one? Well, you want to have your camera, your phone, or whatever device ready to snap a picture. You can also set up some type of cameras, like Nest cameras, and set them up overnight so that you might have a better chance of spotting them. Keep in mind that if you don't see an actual fairy, if you see any orbs of light, many people have reported seeing flashes of light near the grass, or blue orbs of light glowing in their videos or their pictures. If you see those, that is your fairy. Now, if fairies do present themselves, there are some warnings or words of caution to remember. The first thing is, not all fairies are benevolent. Some fairies, or trickster fairies, can be malevolent. So be careful of what types of fairies you are inviting into your space. Words and names are sacred to fairies. So be careful of what you say to them, how you say it, because you don't want to offend them at all. Also, never give your real name to a fairy. You can always offer them your nickname or just a name that you like instead. And don't ask for a fairy's name. That is considered rude, and fairies do like good manners. Now you are ready to find your very own fairy. So to review the steps, remember, step 1 is to believe. Step 2, create a space or a fairy garden. Step 3, prepare your offering. Step 4, wait and watch. And then finally, step 5, when you do spot your very own fairy, remember to be respectful, kind, careful, and considerate. And I would love to end with my favorite fairy poem. Few folk have seen a fairy, but I found this one for you. If you believe with all your might, she'll make your dreams come true. So good luck in your fairy hunting, and have a magical day.